Awesome. All right. Oh, thank you, Rob. That is always helpful. So, where we're going to be picking up, and actually, I do think we're at the very top of page 28. I think we're able to round the corner of that page because I think that was my only goal. And do I achieve those? Not that often. Also, welcome, page 28, I believe. And we'll be kicking off at the very, very top of the page, right where it says, here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. And who we are talking about, I'm not going to go too much into the review or the history, but we're talking about this gentleman by the name of Roland Hazard. And Roland Hazard, he spent money upon money upon money to see the best of the best of the best and found himself drunk again and again and again. And he traveled all the way to Europe to see Dr. Carl Jung. And Carl Jung gave him his diagnosis. And his diagnosis was, dude, you're hopeless. And if you're wondering, that's 100% how they spoke that back then. Uh, and so he traveled all the way to Switzerland. He works with him intensely. He relapses. He comes back and he's like, dude, what the heck? And Carl Jung was like, my bad, dude. You are hopeless. Bad news bears. That was in the official diagnosis. He wrote bad news bears, hopeless. Uh, and he learned the hopelessness of his illness. And almost he had what I like to describe as a step one experience. Now, the steps didn't really exist as they do today. They didn't exist as they do today. But he had that profound realization that he was utterly hopeless. And what happened was it was almost like he begged him, like, man, is there not any exceptions? And Carl Jung says, yeah, you know what? There are. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times, here and there, once in a while. Alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. And we dove in describing what a spiritual experience looks like, what a spiritual awakening looks like. And that was the terrible dilemma. The terrible dilemma was the hopelessness of the illness that we find ourselves in if we're hanging out on a Monday night. Love you guys. You're the cool kids. But like the truth is, if you're hanging out with me, the chances are you have the illness as it is defined in this book, which is to say that I have a lack of control once I start. But also I have this thing that once I say I don't want to do it again, I have a thought that brings me back again and again and again to that first drink, drug, hit, hoot, pill, compulsive or addictive behavior, whatever brings you to this study. And so I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, I cannot do it again. And yet I have a thought that takes me back to it again and again and again. And if that is my experience, I am hopeless. And we often talk about I talk about, and I use words like juxtaposition, not because I think I'm smart. In fact, quite the opposite. I couldn't find a more accessible word, and that's what we're going with. The comparison, a stark comparison between the terrible dilemma and the extraordinary experience which led to freedom. The extraordinary experience is a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening. And what is the result? Freedom, because that's what I'm after. I'm after freedom. And the truth is, if I have the illnesses it's laid out in this book, man, I'm in trouble. You know what I mean? Nothing less than a spiritual experience is going to work for somebody like me. And it goes on to say, it's wild. I was out in Ontario. I did a whole talk on this. Good to see you, Robin. It was for her 1 year. Because she's rad as heck. Yeah. So I did a whole talk on this. So I feel like, oh, everyone's heard about the flimsy read. You're all over it. Just bored as heck about flimsy reads, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So it says, we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. And this is, man, we're definitely going to get through this chapter, but we probably, based on how I tend to talk about this paragraph, we might not get into the next chapter. So apologies in advance. If you would like a formal amends, I got you, boo. I will make a formal amends after the meeting. Alrighty, so here's my experience about this flimsy read and needing that escape with the desperation of somebody who is drowning. And here's my experiences before I found drugs, including alcohol, before I found substances. I don't know about you, but my whole life, it was like I was living in a desert. Do you know what I mean? Bill Wilson, he talks about how his step one experience is this dreary desert of futility, this desert of hopelessness. Man, I felt that way in kindergarten. Do you know what I mean? In kindergarten, life was too much. In kindergarten, it was like the volume was turned up on the world, and I just could not function. It is not appropriate to give a kindergartner crack cocaine. I'm just saying I could have used a hoot, something to take the edge off. Like that. And by the way, I'm going to be clear, this is not diagnostic of this illness, and this might not be your experience, but it's mine. And I spent my whole life in this desert. And I always like to, when I talk about deserts, I always like to make the joke. Clearly, for those that know, no, I'm not doing well in sand. I'm spinning those tires. But also, you can tell, oh, this complexion, I'm not doing well in direct sunlight, you guys. She burning. You know what I mean? Ooh, it's not going well. I need the shade. Uh, I'll be red as a lobster before you know it. And so I'm living this life, and it's like life is too much. And by some miracle of miracles, I find my way next to a stream. And that stream for somebody like me is drugs and alcohol. And I'm just so thirsty. And I can see that is some that could just quench this thirst that I've had my whole life. And I wade into the river. It's just a little stream. What could it hurt? And I wade into the stream, and I take a sip, and wouldn't you know, oh, you guys know what I'm talking about? Oh, that first drink glow, like whoo. And some of us is like 3 drink glow, but that feeling, you take that drink, you take that hoot, you do that line. Oh, it's all okay. And man, it works so well. I just need a little bit more. And I start wading a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more into that stream. And wouldn't you know it, the longer I'm in that stream, the more that stream, man, it's got a nasty undercurrent. And that undercurrent is that physical allergy. You see, what happens for me is I take that drink, I take that drug, and it's like a little switch that goes off in the back of my head, and it tells me more. And I don't know about you guys, but my experience is I take one, and that first drink, first drug, first pill, first whatever brings you to the study, that first one demands a second. And that second, it insists on 4. And 4 will not relent until I've had 8. And it is screaming at me until I've had 16, and so on and so forth. And you see, I don't know about you guys, but I have a feeling it's like you guys, because if we're hanging out on a Monday, I love you. Tuesday for Scott. I don't think we have our other resident, other side of the worldies. I don't think we have our Australians here, but I love you regardless. And here's my experience. You see, once I start, I can't stop. Once I start, man, I don't know where I'm going to end up or what I'm going to do, but more often than not, I drink and I use and I engage in these addictive behaviors until I've crossed lines in the sand I said I would never cross. I do things I said I would never do. Do you know what I mean? That undercurrent takes me, and my life begins to look like absolutely unrecognizable. See, that undercurrent takes me, and I start to lose things I never wanted to lose, like my shoes. Those were regularly missing. Sometimes also my pants, but if I had them, they were regularly wet. There's some of you that are, get what I'm saying, and there's some of you that look at me with judgment, which is fair enough. Tell me what it's like to be part of the Dry Pants Club, because I had to have a spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps to be a part of the Dry Pants Club with all you cute, cool kids. But I would lose more than just my shoes. I would lose relationships I never wanted to lose. I would lose hopes. I would lose dreams. I would break trust. I would betray people I never wanted to betray. Yeah, I would lose my dignity and my self-respect. See, I was losing a lot. And man, that undercurrent had me. And I started to realize, man, I can't touch the bottom of this river. I can't grab a hold of this thing. I got to get out of the river. That current has me. And I would say what we all say, which is, I'm never going to do it again. And I would look for ways and means that I not do it again. And I would try to grab a hold, man, I would try to grab a hold of these things that were floating by me in the river. You know, there'd be like some branches, and I would try to grab a hold of this branch, and it would be self-will. I'm just not going to do it. And I would grab a hold of it, and it wasn't enough. Do you know what I mean? I would grab a hold of it, and it would be prickly, and it wasn't working, and I would fall back into the river. And that there's a thing that happens, and I don't know if this is your experience, but it is mine. The longer that I'm in the river, the stronger that current gets. See, the longer that I'm in the river, that water become like a tide at flood. And if you've ever seen a river at flood, man, it brings with it debris. And I'm starting to get desperate. I start to see that I am in trouble. And I'm starting to see some other debris grabbing a hold of things. You know, I start to grab a hold of, you know, like there'll be a little chair floating by, and that chair, that'll be fear and consequences. And I'm grabbing a hold of that chair of fear and consequences, but it's not buoyant. It sinks to the bottom and it begins to take it with me. And I got to let go of that because it doesn't work. And I start to grab a hold of other things. You know, I start to grab a hold of some debris, some logs that look like things like going to meetings. It looks like trying to call before I pick up. It looks like psychologists, doctors, psychiatrists, and they are not bad things, but they're not sufficient. See, I try and I grab a hold of that log, and it doesn't work. It's slippery, and I can't grab a hold of it. And man, the current takes it, and it takes me underneath, and I start drowning. Do you guys know what that's like, to try these things and they not work? To try these things and find yourself in a place when you're drinking again, using again, or you just want to die and you're in the river and you're drowning. And then there's some, you know, other stuff that would float by, you know, maybe a little exercise bike. And I'm like trying to grab a hold on it because I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work out. And y'all know, I always talk about like, oh, abs. They did not once, and I had them not recently, but there was a time in my life I had abs. Didn't lead to abstinence. And I always say I was ripped, but I kept getting ripped, you know? Did not keep me sober. That exercise bike wasn't working, you know? And I made this joke when I was out in Ontario. It's like a door floats by, and that door is a relationship. And I try to climb a hold of that door. I'm thinking Titanic. That's what I'm thinking, you know, and there it's not working. And you might think, oh, there was room on that door for Paige. There was not. It was a buoyancy issue. The issue was buoyancy. It was not space on the door. And again, I made this joke already, but I'm gonna make it again. If you are wondering and you think, oh, Titanic, what a beautiful romantic movie. Absolutely not. Please do not gauge your sex ideal or relationship future after that movie. It's not healthy. Let me paint the picture for you. Rose, goodness gracious, Rose, she's engaged to another man, so she's not physically available to be in a relationship. Also, when Rose and Jack meet, Rose is at the front of the boat just about to jump herself off. So I'm just going to suppose that if she's in an immediate suicidal crisis, she's probably not emotionally or spiritually available to be in a relationship. She doesn't really have the bandwidth to, you know, have that give and take and honest communication. You know what I'm saying? And then they have this torrid love affair, and we get that, you know, torrid love affair. They're steaming up the car. They're having a thing. And then he sacrifices himself and dies. I'm just saying we can aim a little higher, guys. Like that's my hope for all of us, is that we don't have to resort. But I try to get on that door, and then I fall into the river. I get back on that door, and I'm like, I can change the door, you know, like, and some of you guys know what that's like. And you know, I'm in the water, and I'm drowning. And I'm drowning, and I've tried everything and anything that I can think of. And the water's at flood. And since I was out in Ontario, and we were kind of talking about Ontario, and man, it's like I'm approaching Niagara Falls, and the Canadian side, not the American one, Oh, that was a little dig. That wasn't nice. Our waterfall is better. Uh, but like I'm approaching that and I am in trouble. And what I see out of the corner of my eye is flimsy reed, this flimsy reed. Paige, you're telling me a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience is sufficient enough to overcome alcoholism, to overcome addiction, to overcome what brings you to this all-inclusive study. You're telling me what I need is a spiritual experience? No, thank you. No, thank you. I don't want one. I was not here for that. I was not interested in that. I was not looking for that. No, thank you. You know what I mean? But why would I grab a hold of this flimsy reed? Well, the first reason is because of people like you who are properly armed with facts about yourselves, and you can point to the predicament that I'm in. You can tell me things about your experience being in the river, and you're like, oh, you know what it's like to try the door. Oh, you know what it's like to try the door. That not work. You tell me, and like, man, you know what it's like to be in the river. And once I can really see the hopelessness of my predicament, man, I got no other options. I got to grab a hold of it just out of desperation. But also the other reason is that you guys get to be demonstrations of this power, demonstration of this way of life. But let's be honest, this whole like the 12 steps to produce a spiritual experience, you're telling me this God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, that's my solution? I'm going to grab a hold of it because I've got nothing left to grab. And it is only from that desperation. Man, doesn't it feel like a flimsy reed? It feels like I'm going to grab a hold of it. And as soon as I do, man, the currents, it's going to take me and the reed, and man, over the falls I go. I'm not going to survive. It's not going to work. But out of that place of desperation, I make a decision. And that decision is the third step decision. I decide that what I am going to do is I'm going to grab a hold of that flimsy reed with everything that I've got. When I make that decision and I follow it up with action, I begin to write inventory. And as I write inventory, I begin to wrap my hand around that flimsy reed. And as I begin to share that inventory with God and another person, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, with God and another person, I began to put my hand around that reed to really put it in my grasp. As I take that quiet hour, I do my 6 and 7, I begin to grab it, like clench it. And as I go out and I 8-step list and I go and make my amends, what happens is in my hand, that flimsy reed transforms and turns into the loving and powerful hand of God that pulls me out of the water to safety, where I am on the riverbed, safe and protected, where I knew I needed to get, but I found no way. Man, I'm swimming and I got nothing. And I get to this riverbed to safety. Now, if I do not grab a hold of it, if I do not take those actions to really grasp it, to grab it, I'm down I'm up the creek without a paddle. I was not planning on using that expression. It doesn't matter what type of creek it is. I would not say that bad word. I'm watching my language. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if I don't actually grab for it. And in that moment of desperation, it does not matter. It does not matter my thoughts or opinions or beliefs about the flimsy reed. What matters is that I grab a hold of it so that I have an experience with it. And I will say we are people that are drowning and will complain about the color of the life preserver. Yellow? I'm a ginger. We don't do well in yellow. Could we do something that's a little more chartreuse? I'll have to settle for orange. Do you know what I mean? We'll complain about the life preserver, but that's the reality. And so I grab a hold of this flimsy reed, and it turns into this loving and powerful hand of God who pulls me out to safety, to the riverbed where I am safe and protected, and I get to stay there safe and protected, contingent on continuing to live this way of life. And I do that I do that in step 10. And I do that in the 11th step. And I grow and deepen and build a relationship with this power. But then I get to be that demonstration for others. I get to have my hand out to try to catch those who are drowning in the stream of misery, who do not know that there is a way out. Man, I did this big book bounce around, but let's do it. Let's pop over to page 163. Sorry, we're going on an adventure. It's like, did anyone else grow up with the Magic School Bus? Like, I really feel like, yeah, some of you and some of you are like, no, Paige. I really feel like a like a big book Miss Frizzle. Like in this moment, that's the vibe I think I'm given. Page 163, we're at a vision for you. And so page 163, 1, 2, 3, third paragraph down. Our friend proceeded to tell him, and this is a story of a gentleman who was, trying to do some public information to carry the message to find alcoholics to work with. And he spoke with this doctor, and it said our friend proceeded to tell him. And with such good effect, the doctor agreed to a test among his patients and certain other alcoholics from a clinic which he attends. Arrangements were also made with the chief psychiatrist of a large public hospital to select still others from the stream of misery that flows through our institution. And you see, as a person who has recovered, my responsibility is to have my hand out, to reach out, to grab a hold, to be a part of that flimsy reed of God, to reach out to those who are drowning in the stream of misery. And we can find them as we come to meetings, whether they're new, whether they're relapsing, whether they've been around and they are drowning and dry at the same time. That's an awful way to live. And we can find them by doing H&I work, public information work. We have to have our hand out to them. Man, they're drowning. They're just trying to keep their head above water. That is my experience, and that is what I am called to do, to be a demonstration of this power, to be adept at the tools, which very simply are the 12 steps as outlined in this book, to be adept and to be skilled with these things. Man, because if people are drowning, their lives are at stake. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. That doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. That just means, man, let's do the best we can to offer what we have. And what we have is a way out that works, a solution that works, a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, and it works. I would probably be doing other things. I'm not sure what other things because I don't have an abundance of experience with hobbies. Probably bird watching. Actually, if this didn't work, what would I be doing? I'd be dead. Oh God, yeah, no, I like at best case scenario, I'm smoking crack behind a dumpster with wet pants. I'm not watching birds. Pinky, yeah, Ben knows. Pinky's up because I am a lady. Yeah, Robin knows. She was driving me from London from Hamilton to London. And I'm like, oh, a hawk. And Robin gets it. She appreciates the birds. We got to see a northern cardinal on the way. Her sponsor, however, who is my sponsee, does not appreciate the birds. So when we're driving on the 401, which is not a fun highway, I don't drive, so I don't mind. But she's been very clear. Keep your bird moments to yourself, please. Like restrain. So I'm like, as a bird goes by. I'm fun to road trip with. That's subjective. That's subjective. Anywho, without I'm passionate about it because it works. I'm passionate about it because I've not seen anyone really, really give themselves to this thing and continue fail. I've never seen it. And so going back to page 28, and I'll just reread what I've read so far, just so we all can have some time to find it, because I know it's a bit of a bounce around. It says, we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. Actually, don't go back to page 28. I'm going to take us on another bounce around. I am so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize profusely. Page 100. Page 100. Some of you guys know. How could we not? Page 100. Oh, so bear with me. Yeah, we will try to finish this page and a half in an hour. Keep coming back. I know I will. Alrighty, page 100, first full paragraph. We'll be back to 28 in a moment. So it says both you and the new man. And that's you and the sponsee, the person that we're reaching out to, the person who we're helping to pluck out of the stream of misery. Must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. Some of y'all know this is where I'm pedantic. It's spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection, as opposed to progress, not perfection. How am I growing spiritually? That is what my sobriety is contingent upon. And it says, if you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have imagined. How do I put myself in God's hands? I grab that flimsy reed like my life depends on it, because it does. That is how I get me from the misery and suffering and drowning of the river of alcoholism or addiction to God's hands. I grab a hold. And it says, follow the dictates. That directions, just do this. That's what's saying. Directions of a capital H, capital P, higher power. And you'll presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. Man, that is a powerful promise. And that's what's on offer. Not just don't drink and get high one day at a time, a new and wonderful world, no matter what our present circumstances. And all that is asked of me is to grab a hold of this flimsy reed. Back to page 28, and for at least for now, last bounce around, no promises for the rest of the study. I've learned to not make promises I can't keep. Off we go, page 28. So we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. Living. I lost the G. I don't know where it went. Living. Design for living. I heard it. I'm sure you did too. But what I want to emphasize is that this is a way of life. This is not, oh, that's great, I'm out of the river, toodles. This is how I live my life. These 12 steps are how I show up to all areas of my life. It is not a set it and forget it program. It is how we live. And it says, the distinguished American psychologist, William James. Some of you guys know, oh, she's going to go on a William James tangent. I am. And again, apologies. William James, in his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. And what we're talking about in Varieties of Religious Experience, it is a book, and you can purchase it as a book, but it was originally a series of lectures that were given from the American psychologist William James in Edinburgh, Scotland, about this phenomenon known as a religious experience, or a spiritual experience, or a spiritual awakening. And I like one of the most incredible things. A couple like fun facts that like feel free for the history husbands to correct me. We're 2 for 3, so it could happen. William James, I think I spoke about this last week. He was at a conference where Carl Jung, and I think it's the 1908 conference. Somebody will let me know if it's 1912, 1910. Rob will correct me. 1909, come on. Oh man. Oh, you don't want me on your history trivia team. Don't invite me. 1909, come on, Paige, get in the game. I don't know why I'm like this. But he met Carl Jung and shared with him what he was studying about these religious experiences. And also Bill Wilson, after he had his spiritual awakening, after he took the actions that later became the 12 steps. Our homie, Ebby Thatcher, Throckmorton, he showed up and he gave him the book Varieties of Religious Experience, which, if you know anything about the book Varieties of Religious Experience, it's known as being a real cash, easy read, super chill. It's just it's a light thing to pick up right after you detox. Rob's giving me a face. I know, I'm being facetious. It's an incredibly challenging book. It's antiquated language. It's really difficult language. Um, it's known for being dry. It's known for being not that interesting. And so obviously it's one of my faves. I just love it. There's this thing, I just love listening to Varieties of Religious Experience, listening because that's how I do my reading at the airport. I really enjoy Varieties of Religious Experience at the airport. Yeah, you got it, Kathy. You know what's up. You can get it as a PDF online. Rob's probably already put that in the chat. And a part of why I really love this book, one is more about me being a giant weirdo, but we can just lay that aside. It was apparent from the beginning. Uh, no worries. I'm just glad you came. Um, so part of what I really enjoy about it is there was these moments when I was listening to Varieties of Religious Experience where the penny dropped for me and certain things fell into place. And one of the things that I would hear in the rooms is meditation didn't mean meditation in the 1930s. It just meant thinking about things. And there was something about that that never quite sat right with me. That didn't sort of line up with my experience. Yeah, thank you, Howard. We got all the fun facts in the chat. And in Varieties of Religious Experience, he talks. It's kind of set up like our book in the sense of there's information and then a story, and then information and then a story. You'll notice that, like, Bill will give information on the mental obsession, and then we read about the jaywalker. You know what I mean? It follows this pattern. But in it, he was interested in studying spiritual awakenings. But he's like, "Nah, son, I'm not." That's how they spoke back then. He was like, "Nah, homies, if I'm a study," that's why it was such a difficult read. If I'm a study these spiritual awakenings and stuff, I'm a study the big ones. Go big or go home. Go hard or go home. Woo! I'm William James. That's how he spoke. Uh, he also, that's how you know it was him, because he would announce himself. He would say, "I'm William James." Uh, it's historically accurate. Nobody have a look in the chat when Rob and Howard try to correct me. It's fine. It's fine. But he was interested in studying these powerful experiences, people that started movements. And he referenced some people like St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross. He referenced the Quakers. He referenced the Quietism movement. He referenced the Prayer of Quiet. He referenced Sufi mystics. He referenced St. Francis de Sales, which I pronounce very anglicized. But he referenced all these people who had meditative practices. I'm pretty sure he even referenced the cloud of unknowing. If he didn't, there was this delightful lady who was like, William James, Evelyn Underhill, who absolutely. So all of this tangent to say, meditation for surezies did mean meditation. Howard doesn't wish to be pedantic. I don't know if you had 3 wishes. I think pedantry might be one of them. Oh, thank you, Howard. Yeah, it's exactly. They were like, yeah. So William James, he's like, dude, Saint Teresa is rad as heck. That's not fully true. He was a little critical. But Saint Teresa's rad as heck, and she meditates. That's what it says. But it just tied these pieces together. He also spoke about Bill Wilson's spiritual experience, not before it happened, but the type of spiritual experience that Bill Wilson had. He referenced it and he spoke about it. And it was an experience of the luminous variety of light. And he didn't, an interesting thing, and we'll get there when we get there, but he, at no point in the book did he talk about the educational variety. That's what got me to read the book, is somebody was like, did you know he doesn't say that in there? And I'm like, oh boy, that sounds like something I've got to find out. And that's the sort of person I am. Don't tell me not to do something, I'm gonna go do it. uh, it's um, was it who was it? It was Harry Tebow that said that we were childish, right? Right, King baby. That's me. Get me a tiara. Rock and roll. And he also described mystical states, as in mystical just means experiential with the divine, experiencing reality, to quote Evelyn Underhill. But he describes them as having these four qualities, a spiritual experience, essentially having these four qualities. The first is that it is ineffable, which is to be experienced, to be understood. The second is that it is noetic. It provides these divine truths that we wouldn't otherwise know. And bear with me if you're like, what is noetic about the spiritual awakening that we have in 12 steps? Well, let me tell you about some of my noetic experiences. That I'm not a giant piece of garbage. I literally need the spirit of the universe to be like, knock, knock, knock. That might not be the case, homie. God speaks like that too sometimes. That might just be my brain. But it also spoke about, so it was, the experience itself is transient. It comes, but the effects of it remain. So it'd be like an experience, and that experience passes, but the effects of it remain. And then also, he would speak about it, the passivity. I cannot control it. I can't make it come, and I can't make it leave. But we have a way to reproduce that spiritual experience. And he then also talks about like characteristics of people who have, he doesn't say recovered, but of people who've had these experiences. And he talks about like, if you've had one of these experiences, you might be human and fallible and fall short in so many ways, but there's a level of faith that doesn't fall away. Now, I will say, for people like us, there's actually, going back to the king baby tangent, I'm not doing well at finishing this chapter. But there's a thing in the childhood development that's known as object permanence. I believe it was Paget. I think that was her name, the lady that discovered it. It's why peekaboo is so rad with little ones. And if you're wondering, I am a competitive peekaboo player. I will peek a boo. You know what I mean? With that baby all day, all day. I'm so good at it. But part of why peekaboo is so interesting is that when you go like that, you cover your eyes as a baby. It's like, if it's gone, if it's out of sight, it's gone forever. Do you know what I mean? And so often, those of us in spiritual kindergarten, we have not developed spiritual object permanence. What I mean by that is we develop these dramatic, powerful recoveries, but if we don't continue to grow and don't continue to do this work, how often have we done the work, had a powerful spiritual experience, then got complacent for whatever reason, and then life starts hitting. Like, it's a little lifey, you know what I mean? And it starts, these problems piling up. And even though we're not doing the work, and even though when we did the work, holy moly, it worked. We think the work could not possibly work for something like this. Do you know what I mean? It's like I don't have spiritual object permanence. And it's like, if I stop doing the work, it's like I'm like, peekaboo, and it's gone. It doesn't happen. It doesn't devolve right away. And by the way, is this the weirdest tangent I've ever been on? No. Is it the weirdest one today? Also, probably no. But I'm going to acknowledge it's. Howard also does a big book study. He doesn't play peekaboo in it. Well, actually, that might not be true. He might just out of here. He might. I don't know. Peekaboo. Alrighty. So that's my William James tangent for now. And in it, he just indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God, which is to say, not an idea of God, which is to say, an experience of God. That's what I'm after, ineffable. It needs to be experienced just as I was after the experience in the pipe, the experience in the bottle, the experience in the pill. I'm after an experience. And I'm after an experience of God, not an idea of God. For example, reading Varieties of Religious Experience will absolutely not keep you sober. That's an idea of God. And for some of us, it might be like, oh, this it might make you want to drink because it's known for being dry and heavy, you know. I enjoy it though. It's my little jam because I'm fun at parties. All right. It says, we have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. And what a powerful statement in a book that's published in 1939. And it goes on to say, if what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, not if what we believe, not if what this book tells us so, but if our experience, if what we have experienced means anything at all, it means, and this is what our experience is, that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living, capital C, creator. This is a book that was published in 1939. This is a book that went out into the world before some atrocities of humanity were happening. And in the United States, when, man, there were people of different races that could not sit together at the same table. Do you know what I'm saying? And there's something that I've found about true spirituality. True spirituality. If it's true, it's true. Do you know what I mean? If it's true, it's true. And if it's true, I can find it anywhere. And there is truth in this. That regardless of where we come from, yes, you, even you, yes, you, especially the one who wants to fight me on this one. This is one of the hills I die on. The meditation is the other hill, but this is a hill. You are the child of a living creator. That we're all God's kids. I have a friend who talks about God doesn't have grandkids, only kids. That idea of there's not a separateness. There's a closeness. There's an intimacy. There is a desire to be connected. Do you know what I'm saying? And also, man, I got some bad news. Do you know what that also means? For some of you, oh, this is gonna suck. It means you will never look in the eyes of somebody God does not love. Oh, I ruined somebody's day. I just know it. And that does not mean we walk around like this. I'm not looking. I'm not looking. That's not the takeaway. And I love that idea of a living creator. God, higher power creator, as a present tense verb, not a past tense idea, a living, moving, not a stagnant, but something flowing. And that's been my experience. Creator with whom we may form a relationship. And I'm big on this being relational. This is a relationship. Some of you guys have had to sit through my Tinder talk where I talk about the spiritual journey like it's Tinder. It's applicable. I'm not going to do it now. We don't have time. I've had too many tangents. But I'm not here about building an idea or a theory or a belief. I'm here building a relationship, which is to say an experience. And it says, form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we're willing and honest enough to try. The only thing that is asked of me is to try. That's it. Now, where do I need to direct this trying? Because I tried for years and I was drowning in that water. At these 12 steps, that is where I need to try. William James spoke about these spiritual experiences that were miraculous in nature and couldn't be replicated or reproduced. But we have a way with 100% certainty, if I give this everything that I've got, I will get this result. It is foolproof. More powerful than that, it's got to be alcoholic proof. Because we do it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's drug addict proof. It's compulsive overeater proof. It's compulsive gambler proof. It's codependent proof. It's you proof. Absolutely. It can happen. It does happen. All I've got to do is try. And it says, those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There's no friction among us over such matters. And again, that speaks to the deep truth that we have found here. Man, that like, and like I've sponsored people from a whole variety of faith traditions, like, and I have friends, I have a friend that's a Blackfoot sun dancer, and I have friends that like, and actually his wife, who I love dearly, she's one of my spiritual homies. She's really into like tarot card reading and this sort of thing, and which is beautiful. And it's this idea that if it is truth, you can find it anywhere. You know what I mean? If it's healthy spirituality. And so it says, we think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair, which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such membership. And you might be like, I thought this was not a religious program. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are we on about? And it's not. But I want to contextualize this, because if you like, imagine you got sober in 1940 and you had only a copy of this book. There's no Zoom meetings to hop in on. There's no meetings to go to. There's no intergroup. There's no central office. There's a little office in New York which had been established. You know what I'm saying? And what I do is I follow the directions by myself that are outlined in this book. You see, this book contains everything that I need in order to recover. And I follow these directions, and I go and I work with others, and I have this experience. And man, I want to grow, and I want to seek more, and I want to help others. But it is also helpful to connect with people who are a little farther along on the spiritual path. Rob does martial arts. I can't remember which type of martial arts, but when we were doing the meditation talk, he was talking about the martial arts. So don't mess with Rob. He can kick your butt. And don't mess with Rob anyways, because he's lovely. You guys, be nice to Rob. There it is. But in martial arts, there's this like belt system. We do not have a belt system. But if you want to get good at fighting, and we use our words, and we use our inventory, we use our prayers in 12-step. But if you want to get good at fighting, don't do it. You want to like wrestle or spar. Yeah, from jaywalker to jujitsu. And I have sponsees that talk about how I do spiritual judo or spiritual jujitsu, and they're like, I have a problem. And then suddenly they're like, I am the problem. How did you do that, Paige? But in that belt system, if you want to get good at fighting, if you want to get experienced with it, you've got to like wrestle or spar with people that are at your belt level. You've also got to learn from those black belts, those people who've been doing it longer. And you also have got to like help and teach like the white belt. And it's like that in the spiritual journey. I've got to have people to work with, and I've got to have people that are growing with me along the spiritual journey, and people who are a little further along that I get to learn from. And we use our words, and we don't hit. No hitting. But that is why I would make that suggestion. Because if I was alone with this book in 1940, 1941, there's no podcasts. I can't download varieties of religious experience off the internet. Where would I go and find it? Where would I find these ways to grow and seek spiritually? Well, in Calgary, Alberta in the 1940s, I'd probably go to church, because there's a chance that there are people who are seeking the way that I'm seeking. And that's why they're offering that as a suggestion. In the 11th step, I get to seek and explore. I do not get to like do that as a way to avoid the actions of the 12 steps. But once I have begun to really live this way of life, we got to have some fun in step 11. So it says, in the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. So in the next chapter, we're going to be diving in, probably slowly, but diving in to really breaking down the obsession of the mind. And then the chapter addressed to the agnostic, that chapter is going to really break down the second step. It says, many who were once in that class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Man, that's important because it is not about what I think, what I believe, or what I feel, right? No such convictions, a great obstacle. That belief is not an obstacle to the experience contingent on me taking the actions. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I can be held back by my brain and my ideas. But if I take the actions, regardless of what I think or how I feel, I just write the freaking inventory anyways, I will get well. I will get well. And if I don't, I won't. And it's, yeah, what I believe or what I think, it's no great obstacle if I'm willing to do it. And sometimes we hear in the rooms that, there's nobody too stupid to get this thing, but there's people who are too smart, and that's not true. There are not people who are too smart to get this thing. There are people who think they are too smart to get this thing. If I'm willing to take this action, if I'm willing to approach this thing with curiosity and open mind, you can run it skeptically. If I'm willing to do it, I will get well. That's my experience. And it says further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we have recovered. Recovered. Recovered is the freedom that we're talking about that comes as the result of the spiritual awakening. Recovered. I take these actions, and it produces a spiritual awakening. And as a result of that, the mental obsession is removed. And it says clear-cut directions. That's why we go line by line. That's why we study this. Because I don't want to miss the directions. You know what I mean? It's like you're on the 401 and you missed your turnoff. That sounds like a nightmare, I assume. We can't all be fancy on the 407. That's my Ontario joke. just for the delightful folks in Ontario. And it says each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. Because that's what this is about, building a relationship with power. You don't have to call it God. God is a title, not necessarily a name. We know that to be true because of all the things that we put in the position of God in our lives, like the door, oh, he's God, examples of that, or power, or prestige, or status, or money, you know what I mean? But that's what we're talking about, building a relationship with this power. It says these give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. That's what we're meant to talk about. It says we hope that no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Because we get pretty open and honest, and it's kind of hoping like, oh, you're talking about smoking crack behind the dumpster, pinkies up? Like a lady, We hope that's not bad taste. It probably is. It probably is. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages. And we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. I got to be honest about what it was like with the allergy. I got to be honest about what it's like with the obsession. And honestly, I find it helpful to be transparent about the struggles that I have today. My sponsor talks about that, like that's what people are, that can be helpful. My sponsees do not care that I show up on time. Do you know what I mean? They're like, you're expected to. Do you know what I mean? They don't care about the successes. But they probably do. That's not fair. But what I mean is that's not what's helpful. What is helpful is when I share transparently about how I've failed, how I've fallen short, where I've made mistakes and how I made it right. That's what's helpful. So the more transparent we get to be, the more that we're able to help others. And that's what this whole thing is about. And that's what this book is about, to persuade, if you think that you might have a problem, to be persuaded, yes, I am one of them too. I've got this allergy. I've got this obsession. I must have this thing. I've got to grab a hold of this flimsy reed. I got to have the experience that they're talking about because nothing else can save somebody like me. And so we'll leave it there and kick off more about alcoholism next week. I'll stop the recording and we can wrap up with a prayer.